Welcome, everyone, to this episode where I am interviewing Jacob Finch. So, Jacob is an Eagle Scout and will be heading to Cornell starting in fall 2022. He'll be pursuing a bachelor's of architecture, and he grew up in New York and Connecticut. He and I have kept in touch throughout his high school years, and we first connected regarding his passion projects and inventions. And he has such an impressive background regarding his love for science. Later on, we got back in touch regarding his college application essays. So we'll be particularly focusing on how do you express yourself on essays and how they're different from when you write your essays for high school. And so if you've got questions for Jacob or for me throughout this conversation, let us know either in the comments below, and either he or I can come back and answer those questions for you. So Jacob, welcome to the show.
Hi, how's it going?
It's going well. I'm so glad that we're here to talk about you getting into, first off, your dream school. So you got into Cornell. Tell us, how does it
Woo!
feel? How does it feel to get in?
I'm very excited, very proud. Worked a long time on this. This sort of feels like I've been working towards this my whole life. It's definitely been in the at back of our heads the whole time, forefront definitely now, and it feels very good to have done it, to have gotten that acceptance letter.
Congratulations. So tell the audience where else you got accepted to. So I know Cornell is where you have committed, but where else were you considering going to?
I got accepted to RPI and Syracuse University. I'm going for my bachelor's of architecture, and so I got into RPI architecture, another great school, and Syracuse University for mechanical engineering.
That's so exciting. And all places, great choices. And I know Cornell has been just the dream school for you for quite some time. So congratulations on that. I hope you and your family are super excited and super proud about it.
I mean, a long family tradition there. I've always loved Ithaca, and I've loved the college. And when I visited, I've always been impressed. And one of the memories that sort of comes to my mind when I think about visiting Cornell over the years. Obviously, I haven't gotten to do that as much during the pandemic, but before that, that's a place where my family had gone, had grown up in that town. So we have a strong family connection there. And I just remember visiting there once and seeing, just like popping into a room and seeing a robot with legs on a treadmill and just being like blown away that that was even possible to do in school and to do at university. So that I've just always been extremely impressed by that school and sort of long term connection there.
And it's been so fascinating, Jacob. I think we met back when you were, I think in ninth grade or even earlier, and you had always such a passion for science. I remember we were first talking about patents that you're possibly filing and inventions you were creating, and you have always just been so in love with science and creation. And I think that you're going to make such a great contribution to Cornell. So one of the things I want to make sure we focus on during our conversation today is your application essay, because I know that was one thing that we talked quite a bit about. And knowing you throughout the high school years, trying to figure out how do you even put your journey together, right? You've had such an interesting background. So when thinking back, because as we're recording this, you are done with the application process, right? And now there are rising seniors who are now freaking out about going into the process. When you went back and think about yourself a couple months back, what were some of the challenges or worries that you had when it came to writing your own college application essays?
It's always a challenge just getting started. Even like thinking about what do I want to write about. That's always such a challenge, and then you put it off, and you think about it, and it festers, and you're not getting any of it out. So I would say is just get started. My strategy for writing most essays has always been to write stream of consciousness and then fix it, and then work on it and develop it. Maybe even create another draft fresh, but at least you got something on paper. And so I think that's a really important first step. And I go about that just by writing stream of conscious.
Did you feel like you knew exactly what you wanted to write about when you first got started? Or a lot of times I'm seeing students where they have either so many ideas and they don't know where to start, or they have no idea and they're stuck. Where did you find yourself?
Well, I just sort of thought about what's the strongest part of my story. What would be the most convincing, interesting thing about me to put forward to a school. And at the time, and I believe now, that would be my achievement of becoming an Eagle Scout. And so for all my life, I've been in, or for most of my life, I've been in the Boy Scouts and the Cub Scouts. So it's been a part of my life for a very long time, and I've worked a very long time to get to where I am now. And so I just had known through school counselors, through discussing it with admissions people, that Eagle Scout is a great thing on any resume. And I wanted to put my best foot forward. And so I talked about that. And not just that, hey, I accomplished this, hey, I did a great thing, but there were a lot of, well, I wouldn't call them slip ups, but there were a lot of challenges along the way in finishing up.
So as you were putting your essays together, and especially about that journey as an Eagle Scout and everything you learned, I know there were some questions that you had related to how to make your essay stronger. And so when we started working together, we were trying to work on how do you actually clarify and get your story clearer. How did working together then during that period of time, how did it help you get clearer on how you wanted to tell your story?
Well, from putting together my story, it takes time, it takes effort, it takes a lot of revision. And so what I had written was definitely from the beginning was definitely an outline of what I wanted to say. It's just making sure that all of the key points, key takeaways were clearly and actually stated. And so sort of picking out what like the meaning of an event might have been for me, for my story in that regard, was very important, and that was something I had to work on, and that's where I got your help. So I would, at the time, I would have said something like, well, I had planned out my Eagle Scout project in the, I don't know, ninth grade, and then I had to drop it. And then in the 10th grade I had another idea, and I had to drop it due to the pandemic, and sort of recenter and refocus what my goal may have been, and things like that. And so I really had to think about how can I pick out a meaning from this and state it and write about it in a way that's convincing to admissions.
So I think sometimes it's helpful for students to kind of understand some specifics around that. If you don't mind me getting a little bit more.
No, I don't mind at all.
So I know one of the things, your story was incredible. So just in terms of a quick summary, was regarding you seeking out what should this Eagle Scout project be. You had lots of amazing ideas, and then you started, stop for reasons beyond your control, right? And I remember reading your story saying, wow, there's a lot you've accomplished. But what I saw was missing was exactly like you said. What was the meaning behind it? What did you learn? What was the actual thing? So what are some examples of the things you learned as you were taking another look at your essays? So like you mentioned, you were talking about the events, but then now you were trying to go back and figure out, well, what did I learn? Like, what did I actually do? So can you give an example for folks on what that might look like for you?
So for me personally, to give a little bit of a like background to all of that, is that I had achieved the rank before Eagle Scout fairly early. So by the eighth grade, I was at the point where I could have been pursuing my Eagle Scout, and so it's sort of like I've had 4 years to work on this, and I've needed all 4 years just because of how things have turned out. And so in the beginning, it was paperwork as a challenge, and people who I needed to bring in to approve of my project as a challenge, and as barriers that caused me to refocus, retry, retry, and retry. And so I have to sort of formulate a consistent theme and formulate what these meanings are and what I've learned. And, looking, feel, remembering how I felt at the moment, it makes it harder because when you maybe are trying to remember something that happened to you, something you don't really think about, what did I learn? Because maybe you didn't really learn that much in the moment, or you didn't feel like you learned anything in the moment because you're so caught up in the emotions of what's happened to you. So, at the beginning, feeling just angry, and that's, all you can think about because somebody didn't approve of your project and so you couldn't pursue it. That you don't really feel like you've learned anything. You've just sort of learned to dislike one person. And so that's challenging to sort of, what did I actually learn from this? How can I turn this into a lesson that I can say that I've learned to admissions and convince them, hey, I've lived these experiences, and when I come to your school, I'm bringing that to the table, and that will enhance your school. And so, yeah, over the years, I've definitely started and stopped more than most other people have on their Eagle Scouts projects. And there's definitely been a lot of emotions there. And so, sort of just like being admitted to my top college, there's a lot of emotion in finally getting there and being like, success, But, looking back at all the things that were, just straight up were dead in the water versus things that evolved differently. So, for example, sort of spur of the moment, and I hadn't originally gone into this idea thinking it should be an Eagle Scout project or that it could be an Eagle Scout project. I had informed my higher ups at the local level that it would be a great idea during the pandemic to donate the neckerchiefs that Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts wear as PPE, as like face coverings, because at that time during the pandemic, it wasn't known if there would be supply to meet the intense demand. And so that was a concern and an anxiety for, I think, a lot of people. And so by passing that idea along, I wouldn't say it spiraled, but it snowballed. And so that ended up resulting in 35, 40,000 face coverings, neckerchiefs from the Scouts being donated to charities in New York and New Jersey. And so at the end of that, and after being interviewed by like local news and being written about in all these like scouting magazines, I was like, wow, now that I think about it, that would have been a great Eagle Scout project. And unfortunately, I had not pursued paperwork beforehand, and I hadn't come into it thinking that that was what could happen. And so it just didn't turn into an Eagle Scout project. No doubt that it would have been worthy if I had changed a couple things and involved other people and led people. And I could have done all of that, but at the end of the day, it was a great project, and it just wasn't an Eagle Scout project. So at the time, it was like, yay, I did this great thing, but man, it would have been really great if I had made that an Eagle Scout project. So that there's a lot of emotion in that, thinking I did all this work, it happened so quickly, and it was sort of like this opportunity to get it done at the time was like gone as fast as it came. So there's a lot of emotion in that. And so now writing my essay, I have to think about how does that fit into a story? What lessons do I learn? And yeah, it's definitely challenging. It's definitely challenging, but it's easier looking back than it is to do it as it's happening. So
Yeah.
if yeah.
Well, I think one of the things I noticed is as you were putting your essay together and you shared your draft with me, there's such an incredible series of events that happened, right? Like that, it just being on TV and then helping during the pandemic, and then great ideas even about the food pantry, and then all these great ideas about, I know you had one about creating wooden like learning tools, wooden learning blocks, all these really wonderful ideas that for one reason or another failed, right? From one perspective, right? Of you were successful in the personal protective equipment project, but some logistics didn't pan out for you to actually count it, right? Or for food pantry approval that you had, the stakeholders who said yes were not the right stakeholders, right? So it could look like a series of failures. However, the things you learned and still the benefits to society of what you were able to start are still huge, right? And so I remember reading it thinking, wait a minute though, Jacob, there's so much here that you still can celebrate, right? Even though as I'm reading it, it sounds like, oh, this didn't work and then this didn't work. But actually, there's so many things that you've done in terms of growth and impact to other people. And so I remember asking you those questions, right? I remember not telling you, but asking you, like, well, what did you learn? Or what would you do differently? And then you came to all these conclusions about, well, this is how I would approach it differently next time, right? Or here's what I've learned about processes that need to be approved, right? And so you're able to kind of look at it at these different lenses.
Right. What I've learned from all of this is that old saying, if there was one thing that was consistent throughout the entire story, it would definitely be hurry up and wait. That's It's just one of those things that you learn when you're working with so much paperwork in such a large institution. And even though they give you a lot of autonomy in the Boy Scouts, once you're older, there is a lot of hurry up and wait, fill out this paperwork, and maybe in 2 months we'll get it back to you. And so, I when I was younger, I'd always thought, how does it end up that people are working on this project like bumping up on their 18th birthday? And now that happened to me, and I understand, it's not easy, and they want it to not be easy. So yeah, my final project that ended up earning me my Eagle Scout was I did music education for the physically and developmentally disabled or delayed, for a local organization. I organized some virtual music education, and I brought in family friends, and I brought in fellow students, all of whom were musically talented or did it as a hobby or did it with the school band. And it turned out really well. And the paperwork side of things went faster than it ever had before. And at a certain point, it all just came together and it fit nicely. And it was good. It came out positively. For me, for the clients who I was working for, it really just all fit together and came together. And so it was just a very nice experience to finally see it come together and then be rewarded for it, like how I'd been hoping for so long. And so the past couple months, it's been a combination of sort of the tail end of that and then working on college applications, because these things sort of overlap at the same time. At the same time, I was sort of writing about, hey, I'm an Eagle Scout. I'm also doing the last steps of what literally has to be done to complete the rituals that make you an Eagle Scout. And by that, I just mean, going to an interview with, elders who you haven't met before. You bring family, you bring a family friend, you bring mentors, and you sort of do this interview where they ask you a couple questions, and it's an interesting experience. It was at an Elks Lodge for me. That's just a fraternal organization for those who don't know, and it was those were like the last steps that I had to do, and then I had to do like a celebration and organize that, and I happened to do that online for ease of enjoyment for family friends who live quite a ways away, and so that made it sort of all tie in together. I did this virtual project, and now my celebration is actually online as well, so that all sort of tied in together, and that very tail end of my project and what I was writing about for college was overlapping with me actually applying to college. So, yes, I had completed everything needed to be an Eagle Scout, and undeniably, I know I was an Eagle Scout, but there was also like, okay, I actually have to do this party to literally say it. And so, you know, things come together when they come together. And so, as I was stressing about college, stressing about creating a portfolio, I was also thinking about my achievements very literally, because I had to think about, okay, how am I going to explain it to these old guys in an Elks Lodge? How am I gonna convey that message to them? So there's similarity between applying to college and something that's very similar to like a job interview or something like that. That's the best way I can describe sort of the end of that process.
There's something that you said earlier that I think might be really helpful for students to really hear is you were mentioning as you were living through it, you were not simultaneously analyzing what did I learn and how did I grow, right? You're just going through the emotions of like all of us. We're not
Hmm.
constantly reviewing our day and saying, what did I learn from that? And how do I reflect? And it sounds like a lot of power from your story came from that when you finally had a chance to pause and look back and say, what did I learn from how I had to change my message when I went to the Elks Lodge, or how to communicate this, or what did I learn when I got that no, or when I got the, well, that was a great project that you helped hundreds and thousands of people, but it doesn't count, right? So that power of being able then to reflect back and say like, okay, what did I learn? And how am I going to take what I learned to first explain what I learned in my essays, but also then take that forward with me, right, as I continue to grow. So now that you are more clear on like how to even tell your story, or even how to do that kind of that actual specific tactic of reflection and learning and being able to identify those key kernels of how you grew as a person, how do you think that impacts you just going forward, being able to tell your story now that you've mapped it all out the way you have, and even just going forward when you're trying to tell different parts of your life or different stories about yourself, how might that be helpful to you?
So definitely a component of all of this is being a Boy Scout, for me at least. You know, everybody has different stories, but a major component of this is that, and you know, not to be a mouthpiece for the Boy Scouts, but it's a great organization and it gives you great opportunities for growth and for learning and for practicing for all of the things that make life and applying to college hard. Going to job interviews, you know, either explaining to a group um, or explaining to an individual or conveying in an essay, well, how do I tell my story? And so in the Boy Scouts, they asked us to write like a life statement. And what does that mean? That just means, what do I want to do? Who have I been? What have I learned from the Scouts? What's the takeaway from this? And, you know, it's not the most important part of everything of becoming an Eagle Scout, but it's definitely prepares you for all of the different things that are challenging. And so I did an alumni interview for Cornell. I wrote an essay. Um, I had to make a portfolio, all these different things. And so I was sort of coming in late to the game when I decided that I wanted to major in architecture. And so it was a lot of realizing and thinking about, you know, I haven't really done that much art in high school. I haven't really had those opportunities. What can I don't want to say scrape together, but what can I scrape together to serve up on a plate that looks presentable, and maybe I can overcome some of that weakness by showing strength in my interview, in my essay, and sort of formatting what I've done in a way that looks good in a portfolio. And so what how do I put that together? That's something that I learned in the Boy Scouts, because you know, it's such an eclectic program. There's so much to do. There's so many merit badges and experiences and adventures that you can have. And you know, you don't think about it, but you can put some of those things in a portfolio. You can present those artistically. You can present some of your experiences artistically, and the Boy Scouts gave me that opportunity to say, "Hey, I did glass blowing. Look, look at what that looks like." That's something artistic that I did. And having confidence in what you've made, even if you personally don't think it's much, at least having exterior confidence is something that the Scouts teaches you. And so I think that's a really important skill is, even if you personally have doubt or have anxiety about, oh no, I'm not going to be able to compete. I'm an imposter. I don't know how I'll be able to fit in when I'm not up to scuff. It's it's really figuring out that, hey, almost everybody else goes through this, and if you're not going through this, good for you. You must be Superman. You must be, the world's most interesting person who has it all figured out. And for most people, that's not true. So it's challenging, or at least I would imagine it's challenging to find that confidence when you're not in a program like the Scouts, because the Scouts throws you in a million different situations and says, we're going to offer you some support, but figure it out on your own. And that definitely increases as you get older. And so, yeah, I think what really helped me was this program, but what did I learn that I would hope to impart onto somebody else is have confidence. Learn to present what makes you the best way you can. And whether that's in the form of an essay or an interview or something else unique, because there's all sorts of different ways to present yourself nowadays during applications. You can link to videos, you can submit videos. If you're a musician, you can play, but doesn't mean that you have to fit within a certain box of parameters 100%. You can do something unique. You can think outside the box and say, I'm trying to do X, but what if I did X and Y and Z and I mushed it all together and made something really interesting? It's all about figuring out how can I present myself and stand out from the crowd, and everybody's trying to do that. And the more that you know about yourself and can analyze, all the different things you did, or if you really only did one thing, let's just say that you were only ever in, I don't know, band, thinking about even the small things and taking a magnifying glass to, like, hey, I did this fundraiser for the band, and that was really important, and we were able to go to Disney World in March or something like that. I'm just making that up because that's something that my friend has been doing recently, and I'm just thinking about that right now. And so, being able to take a magnifying glass and think about it and say, "Wow, I learned so much actually from trying to organize a fundraiser, and there's a lesson there that I didn't see before." That's something. That's not nothing, and you just have to learn how to convey that to um, adults.
That's I think that's going to be so powerful for students to hear because a couple of things you raised. One is you weren't sure 100% what you wanted to be yet throughout high school. You had lots of interests, and then architecture you narrowed down later on. And sometimes students start freaking out when their interests change. So you're evidence that it's okay if you slightly pivot to something else that's more interesting, right? Even if that's not how you started necessarily, but there was always a connection to one day going into architecture. I saw your journey, right, of building things and solving problems and putting things together and tinkering and learning about like wood, even things like that, where I could see the pieces coming through, right? And so sometimes you don't know. But what you did was that you were trying different things until you figured out what you actually liked, which sometimes students feel intimidated by. And then the other thing you mentioned too is the focus on figuring out what makes you, right? Not trying to be someone else, not just trying to be impressive or saying what you think other people want to hear, but looking back at your life and saying, well, what makes me me? What are some of the things that I've done that maybe I might have dismissed or didn't really think much of, but actually when I think about it, I did a lot, right? Or I accomplished things, or I learned a lot, right? And so those things are so important. And then another thing that you mentioned, I think is important, is this notion of confidence, right? And I think a lot of times when students are in the application process, there's a lot of intimidation, lack of confidence, insecurity, right? Of, oh gosh, am I going to be good enough? Or just embarrassment sometimes of even sharing their essays, right? So I see that often, right? Where students are, they don't even want to show it to their parents, or they're feeling awkward showing it to anybody else. And so I always consider it an honor when students trust me enough to say, here's my essay, because I know they are putting a bunch of vulnerability on paper, right? And saying, this is the best I think of me that I'm putting on paper. And now I'm letting an expert look at this. And there's sometimes a lot of emotions around that. So what would you say to someone who might be on the fence about sharing their essays with an expert, and who can actually give them feedback, and they're feeling kind of intimidated or scared about it? What would you say to those folks?
Well, that's really been a challenge for my friends because I've wanted to help them and not like advocate on their behalf, but just say, hey, you wrote something. Don't you want it to be great, to be good? So let me see it. Let me help you. Let me take a peek at it, and I'm gonna try and give you the best feedback I can. But I I can take the lessons that I learned from consulting with Mary Grace, or talking with my parents or grandparents or family friends, and saying, you know, I shared my essay. You don't have to share your essay with everybody and ask for like their opinion on the placement of a comma. You just have to share it. You could share it with, the first step is always just sharing it with somebody, and whoever that is, just do it. You know, don't worry about, oh, I'm unprepared, or it's not finished yet, or I really hate the third paragraph of this essay. It's so embarrassing. I can't stand it. I can't share this with anybody, and I won't. And the only person who's going to see it is admissions. That doesn't make sense. This is going to be seen by people. It is going to be seen by people you don't know now, and you might know in college. I mean, they'll be familiar with everybody on campus, and so they have an idea about everybody. They may not remember every single essay, but hopefully they remember yours, because that would be a great thing. At least if they remember yours, you'd hope that'd be a great thing. And so the only way that you can try and develop it is to show it to fresh eyes and say, oh, it's not much. Just take a look, read it over, just let me know what you think. That's great. That's sort of that's a you're gonna be judged by admissions. If you're being judged by your friends and they give you some feedback, that's much kinder than handing over something so personal, uh, but undeveloped or underdeveloped, to somebody whose only way of expressing their opinion about it to you is saying, yes, you got in, or no, you didn't. So I think, it's challenging to think about, this essay is going to admissions. And the only way that you can really sort of get rid of that stomach ache about what's going to happen when you do hit submit, and pay the fee to submit it or whatever, is to show it to other people and get their feedback. And you know ever people are hopefully advocating on your behalf enough to root for you. So if you're handing over an essay, they read it over, they're rooting for you, and they want to help. So don't worry about what it looks like now. Worry about what it's going to look like when you're submitting it. So don't be concerned with, oh, it's terrible how I've started this and I really don't like it now. If you really don't like it now, you're not going to like it at 11:59, the day that it's due.
I think that's such a helpful point, because I don't think I've ever encountered a student in the decade plus that I've worked with students. I've never encountered one where they said, here is my first draft. I am so confident this is going to get me in. Like that has just never happened. And it has always been, I know this might not be great, or there's always like a disclaimer beforehand, right? That's why I always think of it as such an honor because I know it's so uncomfortable. But what I want to share is that I think it's a total sign of strength for someone to ask for feedback, or it's for someone to ask for give me feedback on how to improve, not just on essays, but in anything in life, right? Because it's so hard to ask for feedback. It can be really hard to listen to feedback, but that's the only way we learn how to improve, right? And sometimes people exist in life never hearing feedback and never knowing that there's things that they could be doing that makes things either easier or better or whatever it might be. So the act of asking for help is not to me a sign of weakness, but actually a sign of strength to be able to put yourself out there and be vulnerable to that. So Jacob, my last question for you before we go, what's your number one tip for students or families who are watching this interview now?
Hard question. You know, I really would say it is reaching out for help on these types of things and having a conversation and getting started on it early and not worrying about, you know, having some judgmental moment with somebody. It's about development and progress and submitting something that is accurate, that portrays you in, the best, an honest, but the best light that you can. And so, staying honest in the process of all of this, being honest with yourself, most importantly, is really important because, when you hand it off to somebody, you are, trusting them that whatever you wrote is 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 going to be read by them, and you're expressing yourself, and of course, that's stressful, that's personal, but you do have to share it with somebody because you're this is going to go to like a committee of people who are going to say, is this the right type of person that we want to bring in? And so I think that, just getting something on a piece of paper and handing it off to, a couple of people you trust and saying, how do I make this piece that I just wrote about me, how to make this really portray the best side of me in an honest manner. And so, giving it, Mary Grace gave me great advice, great feedback. And I got great feedback from a lot of people. And it's really important to do that so you can fine tune. And it's not just fine tuning. Sometimes you really do have to take a step back and be like, all right, I have to meet the word count here, or I have to cut down to meet the word count here. How do I do that? And when you've written something, you're gonna love certain paragraphs or certain things that you feel are important more than others. But when somebody's looking at that in an office, are they going to think what you thought was important and included was important, and what you excluded was meant to be what you excluded? Do they think that's unimportant, or maybe they think that what you excluded would actually be important? So, getting somebody in who has a different perspective and says, I like what you wrote, and I know you want to include this paragraph and take out this paragraph, but I really think it should be the other way around. Hearing that gives you perspective and says, okay, maybe what happened that day wasn't as important as I thought, or maybe it doesn't convey as much meaning as I thought, and I should really focus on this. And I'm not going to waste my energy, trying to fine tune this thing that doesn't work. And I should focus on this thing that I don't really like, but I'm going to have to put up with. I'm going to have to turn into something better, and hopefully that I will like. by the end of this. Because the goal should be that you submit something that you like, that you feel comfortable submitting it as an essay, as a statement of who you are by the end of it. And so that should be your goal, is to say, all right, most of who I've talked to like this. I like this. It took me a while to fine tune and to rework and to start over again and to make it work. It took me a while to do that. But at the end of the day, I feel comfortable submitting this, and it's, maybe it's a little rushed. Everybody has their own challenges with, for me, procrastination. For others, maybe it's, I don't know. But at the end of the day, I did like the essay that I wrote, and I felt very confident in it. And I'm thankful for the people who gave me feedback and made that possible. And, I can't know for sure what got me in, what didn't. Um, but I certainly don't think my essay hurt my admission. You know, Initially I'd been deferred and then I got accepted. And so there was a period of time where I was thinking critically, maybe overly critically, about what I had submitted as my application. But at the end of the day, you just have to be confident and comfortable in what you create, and you have to have that affirmed by the people you trust to give you feedback. And maybe that's an English teacher, maybe that's a parent, maybe that's a friend, maybe it's Mary Grace.
Jacob, I think that you have been so helpful in sharing your journey here with our students and families. And it has also been such an incredible joy for me to see you growing up too over the years, and your changing of interest, the impacts that you've made, and now heading off to Cornell. I think this is so, so exciting. I'm so proud of you, happy for you. And I know your family is so excited. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. And I wish you all the best of luck at Cornell. And I am looking forward to hearing about your continued success in college and beyond. So make sure to keep in touch. And for those of you who are watching, if you are interested in joining my next free live class on college application essays, you can head over to the collegeapplicationessay.com and it will send you over to sign up. All you have to do is sign up with your email and your name, and you'll get information on my next free class. So Jacob, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you. Thank you for all the help. Bye-bye.